So welcome to everybody to How to Human, part 1. So my name's Lisa. And I'm running today's session. And today's session is actually about giving you something. We're going to ideally give you a tool that you can utilize by the end of the session today. I'm going to run through a presentation with you. And in order to get as much information across to you as possible, we're going to take questions at the end rather than stop and start as we go. We're going to have a tiny bit of interaction with each other. We're going to use Menti to be able to take some polls as we go along. It's not mandatory that you have to participate. It's great if you can, but don't worry if that's not your thing. That's totally fine, or you're not in a place to be able to do so. Otherwise, again, please put questions and any problems in chat, and Sarah will be able to deal with them. Otherwise, I appreciate that I'm probably going to dump quite a lot of information on people today. And we've provided very sort of detailed slides, which you'll all have a copy of by the end of today's session for you to be able to absorb it in your own pace. So we appreciate there's a lot of info. So do feel free to sort of sit back and take in what you can and potentially utilize the resources afterwards to be able to kind of catch up. And we're always here for questions in between. So I'm going to start sharing my screen with you today, and we are going to actually jump straight into using Menti. So Menti is, if you're not used to it, is a poll, an online poll scheme, and I'm just going to sort of share this screen with you. And what I'm going to ask you to do is I'm going to ask you to, if you're using a laptop or you open another browser window, to go to menti.com, and all you have to do is put in the code 22462420, or if you've got a phone or a tablet or another device, you can use and scan the QR code and join the presentation, join the slides from there. The code's always going to be at the top, and I think Sarah will be putting that code in the chat in case you lose it and need to come back to it. I would ask that you keep your browser window for this open throughout the presentation and on your phone or other device, because we're going to keep returning back to it throughout today's session. So if you can keep it open, that'd be fantastic. Any technical problems, again, put it in chat and Sarah will be able to help. Okay, so if you can join the Menti, that would be fantastic. And we're going to go into asking you a first question of today to do a quick check-in. I'd love to know all how you're doing in dog scale. Just to keep it light, just, you know, it's a Wednesday, it's a sunny afternoon, you're sitting on the computer looking at me. So I would love to know what it is that you are, how you're feeling today in dog scale. Hopefully no one's number 3, because that's, you know, that's going to be tough for me. Oh no, okay, there is a number 3. Okay, I'm going to win you over by today's session. But generally, how you might be feeling coming to today's session. Okay, got number 6. Okay, got lots of smiles. Oh, I love this. Okay, some sleepiness. Only one person I've got to win over, number 3. Okay, great. Okay, just a little bit of light-hearted fun today. Although you will see there's a theme coming. No number 9s. This is good. This is good for 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Okay. So thank you for being honest. It's nice to see. There's a range of emotions coming to today's session, and that's kind of largely kind of what we're going to be talking about. So I'm going to pause Menti just for a minute, and I'm going to go back to the presentation. I'm going to go through some information now together. And I'm not going to assume everybody participated in the keynote that we delivered, or actually watched it in catch up. So I'm just going to kind of cover a few of the points. So apologies if you've already kind of seen all of this, but it's important that perhaps we refresh ourselves. It's been a couple of weeks since we did that keynote speech. And we kind of approached this kind of concept of leadership, and for people in senior management or management positions and leadership positions within the companies we're partnering with and working with, to talk about this idea of supportive leadership, which is what teams and people and employees are kind of really after. And we kind of looked at that. That's a really hard thing to define, and also very difficult that we just assume everyone knows what it is, how to recognize it, but also how for teams to accept support and what type of supportive leadership is being offered. So this sort of a supportive leadership is kind of where we started to sort of help you find better ways and offer you a tool in order to perhaps be more defining as to what supportive could be for you in your own organization. And when we think about supportive leadership, I think the way I would view it is ultimately about making connections with people, because when we can connect, we are in a better position, better able to offer and receive support. So we're kind of looking to get to a place of connection, which might sound simple, but actually I think in workplaces and in pressured workplaces and in times of vulnerability and insecurity in sectors and industry, it is quite hard to always foster connection, despite our good intentions. So we kind of created How to Human in order to do our best to ensure that we could find better ways to ensure connection is maintained, not only made, but maintained within the workplace. And largely we would do that through communicating with each other. When we did the keynote, we looked at this idea of the difficulty we have of having good intentions and following through with best practice, with good actions. Now, I do wholeheartedly believe that most people come to work with good values and good intentions to get on with the other people that they work alongside with or work for. And I do believe there is a benevolence within us, particularly within the workplace. But there are so many factors that come into play that just because we have good intentions does not mean it naturally follows on to being able to action good communications or supportive leadership, for example, and what that actually looks like and how it's enacted within the workplace. So there's this disconnect, and we obviously demonstrate it with two mountains here, and we kind of need to get from one peak to the other, which is quite an arduous journey, to go all the way down, to go all the way up again. And this is very much about the disconnect between the two, not being able to connect to values, intentions with actions. Could I just ask, just for momentarily, anyone who's joining the call to be able to put yourself on mute and turn cameras off, please, for anyone who might have recently joined. Thank you. We're getting a bit of feedback. Thank you. Thank you so much. The value action gap is kind of what this disconnect is about. It's a more of a technical term, but it's great to think about this gap, about trying to put forward your good values and intentions as a person when you come to work, but also then how we can actually follow through in actions, despite it being busy, stressful, with lots of additional pressures and external factors at play. So our aim is to bridge this gap, bridge this value action gap, and really kind of that's where the work that we're offering sits at the moment. We want to give you a tool that physically helps bridge this gap. And that tool has to be centered on, for me and for Safe in Our World and our partners and our ambassadors, it has to be centered on finding connection with each other. And that is something that takes effort and takes practice, and is an ongoing practice, I think, throughout life, and applies to more than just our work-life relationships. All our interpersonal relationships can be affected by this. So this is why we created How to Human. And I'd sort of phrase it as a language toolkit. And this program, part 1 today and part 2 in a couple of weeks' time, is all about tools for finding connection so that we can bridge that gap between our good intentions and better practice. But we're going to start with the lovely brains that you've all got in your heads and that you have brought to the call today, regardless of how they might be feeling in dog scale. Your brilliant brain is where I like to start. And yes, I have covered this in the keynote, but I'm definitely going to reiterate it again today. 2 + 2, very simple maths equation. The answer is obviously 4. And it's something that you probably instantly know by seeing those numbers. It's an equation that is very familiar to you. You will have learned it since being a child. And it should come as an easy answer, a quick answer. And there's something going on in your brain when we do this, and it's called fast thinking. And that answer, 2 + 2, came out of the fact that you almost certainly have done that maths equation before. It's actually become so embedded in you, it's become instinctive. You've assumed, seeing those numbers, you know that the answer is 4, rather than necessarily counting 1, 2, 3, 4 on your fingers, for example. You've made a judgment because you've seen it before. You've been super reactive, super quick to answer that. And all of this kind of demonstrates to us that the brain is working in a super energy efficient way. What I love about the body itself is that it's sort of like a temple of perfect energy efficiency. There is nothing the body does that expends energy unnecessarily. Not a single cell expends any energy unless it absolutely has to and is purposeful. So we don't just waste energy, and therefore the brain does not waste energy thinking about things that it can fast track to, that it already knows the answer to. And this is a wonderful way to generally keep us alive. It's a big part of our survival. It makes us look twice before we cross the road so that we don't get injured. And it allows us to sort of steer clear from danger and just generally get through the day as a human being. So it's a very important part of our brain, and we spend about half the time living in this fast thinking mode because obviously we're actually trying to conserve energy most of the time. So it's super helpful, particularly in emergency situations when instinct kicks in. It's brilliant. Here's another maths question for you. 317 times 928. I appreciate there are some people that can do this equation instantly. I am not one of those people. And the majority of people I know also would struggle a little bit with this. But when I see a maths equation like that, my brain has to stop. I can't give you an instinctive answer. Those cogs are going to have to start moving and start working. It's like, oh, okay. How do we answer this one? And it's made me stop. It's made me stop and be very present to deal with this new problem right in front of me. I can't just carry on with other things, other thoughts. I have to stop. And this is an example of slow thinking, in the slow thinking mode of your brain. And that's when you go, oh, okay, I might have to try something else here. I might have to try different methods to answer that. Maybe I have to recall, have I seen some like clever meme or some clever video on YouTube about like how to do complex multiplication? Maybe I could ask for help. Maybe I could just reach for my calculator if I can remember where my phone is. Maybe I could utilize other learning. So actually, when you go into a slow mode, your brain is now going to get very good at problem solving. It's going to think of all the opportunities and other ways it could deal with 317 times 928. And that's really helpful, particularly when we are trying to problem solve. And it does make us slow down, but we can't be in this mode all the time because it's hugely energy rich. It's going to take quite a lot. So we have to balance how we operate in our brains. Now, here's where the problem is. Fast thinking is great for some things. It's not so great when we're talking to other human beings. So when we do fast thinking brain, and this often takes place in the workplace because we're so used to shorthand and working at speed and under pressure, that we'd actually tend to default to using this sort of words of evaluation and assumption, those quick judgments, the 2 + 2 brain, like, okay, this needs to happen. What's going on? What's wrong? Why aren't we fixing it? The speed at which we want to use our brains kicks into a fast pace. And the problem with that is we tend to end up using words that others might receive as criticism, judgment, negativity. And often at work, we're also in a fast thinking listening mode too. So not only is fast thinking about the words we speak, but also how we receive those words. So you could be in a fast thinking mode and receiving all of these words coming at you, and you're hearing judgment and criticism because this is a pattern, an instinctive pattern, the place that we are as humans. We think we may have done something wrong or somebody is criticizing us. And so as soon as we kind of get into this mode of communicating in these ways, it's very hard to be connected. And so when we default to our fast thinking brains, we become disconnected with people. And that's about what we say and about how we hear it. So if you are in a leadership position or in a managerial position, it becomes really difficult to be supportive or even receive the right kind of support if we're in this fast thinking mode all the time, driven by the conditioning of our workplaces. So our job, and with what we want to offer to you, is a way to sort of step away from the disconnect and move more towards a way to connect with each other. And as you would imagine, that is about finding different words and hearing differently. So down to me, this is sort of like where I introduce myself. So a very accurate drawing of me in the middle. I don't have a green mohawk yet. I think my wife might divorce me if I tried, but I am many, many things. And I personally have had a career in the film and TV industry for 25 years as a designer. So I'm very used to some very stressful, pressured, slightly chaotic working environments. But I'm also a creative, and that's me through and through. But I kind of shifted from my position in the industry to become a wellbeing consultant and coordinator. I work around sleep health, and I sort of look at human sustainability as an overarching theme, really. I care greatly about creators being able to have good working lives, to be able to thrive at work, but also to be able to continue investing their creativity into the tasks and things that we do. So I became an advocate and work quite heavily within neuro-inclusion, of which this course touches on quite frequently. I also work with social justice, and I do a lot around nonviolent communication and mentoring people. So that's kind of me, my offerings and all the things that I bring to today's session. So mine's not really sort of a straightforward approach. I'm more of a smorgasbord of skills. And that's kind of really how I think a lot of us come to work, and a lot of us have all our experiences, and something I fully celebrate, us being more of a polymath rather than just being singular experts. But because I'm traditionally a designer and an artist, I really do quite like practical things. I really like something tangible, something concrete, something that you can hold, something that you know what to do with. I find it very difficult to work in, particularly in the world of well-being, and even as it's Mental Health Awareness Week this week, talking about mental health, because it's often so abstract. And we often tend to use words that we think we will understand, and they're easy code, but ultimately they keep us within the world of abstraction. And really, to drive change, we do want some practical things. And that's what we're offering with the How to Human is a very practical tool. It's called the Human Handbook. You will be given a template at the end of today's session. The aim of you is to fill in the template for yourselves, and then the next part will be about how to utilize it more fully. But this is a physical guide. It's about telling the world how to best connect with you on a professional level in the workplace. And it is a physical guide. And for the next sort of hour and a bit on this session, we will be going step by step how to fill in this guide by giving you an underlying framework in order how to do it. Now, we give you a template, but we always encourage autonomy with how one expresses themselves. So we're going to give lots of examples, but fully endorse and fully support you sort of taking this as a leap off point to be able to create your own. But I will share mine. It evolves all the time. I'd like to call it a living document. You know, it's a human handbook, so let's make sure it's living, and it's something that is constantly edited and adjusted as you are as a person, constantly evolving. But the idea, and this is an overview of it, it's a 2-page PDF that can be put on an email signature or shared in any other formal ways at work. This idea of our names, pronouns, if that is important to you, basic working hours, you know, where your boundaries are, a little bit about yourself that you're willing to share, that you feel is appropriate. And then, as you can see, there's lots of boxes that have other sort of requests, really, about how best to connect with you. And this is great for people that have no idea who I am. So we can kind of bypass a lot of the awkward and maybe sort of the mistakes that actually may disconnect at the beginning, may insult, may harm someone's dignity or lack of respect. So this is a great way to sort of get us as far ahead as we possibly can to start on a great connective note with each other. And they include things like how I prefer to be communicated with, what I might need as an employee, how I work in, you know, dealing with information, instructions, how I'm in meetings, and how I receive feedback, because I think that's quite important. So this is kind of like what we're working towards. And this is the template that you'll receive. And again, it's an editable PDF, and it's a great opportunity for you to try filling in based on the information I give you today. And then maybe you could develop it into your own with whatever feels appropriate. You could edit some stuff out, you could add some more. It's entirely up to you. But this is a tool, and it's a real sort of wonderful signpost to others to be able to best connect with you. But to fill it in, It's not just like pick anything you want and just write some random sentences. There is an underlying framework to it to be able to help you craft what the best words to use. And this is a simple framework. It is absolutely largely based on nonviolent communication, if you may be familiar with that as a methodology. I've sort of adapted it to a slightly more neuro-inclusive world, wherever possible. But the idea of the framework underpins how we fill in all those boxes on the Human Handbook. And the framework is basically an iceberg in the shape of a triangle. As you can imagine, I'm a designer, so I love a triangle. You'll see quite a few in this program. This triangle represents an iceberg model. You may be very familiar with an iceberg model. If you're not, the premise is we only ever see a tiny bit visible above the waterline, but we don't necessarily see the huge mass that is underneath what is hidden. The Titanic found that out the hard way. But this is about learning to get to the bottom of the iceberg, learning to truly see everything, not just the tiny bit that's visible at the top. And the way that we approach this is a 4-step process where we start at the top, number 1, and we aim to work our way to number 4. So we fully understand everything. We fully see everything that might be hidden. So we understand it ourselves. And the 4 parts are named accordingly as observations, feelings, needs, and requests. And the framework is that you have to follow steps 1, 2, 3, and 4 in order when dealing with communicating with people. And it might seem clunky at first, but this is a fail-safe methodology in which to approach often challenging conversations or potentially kind of challenging workplace situations when dealing with talking to lots of different people. And today we're going to go through steps 1, 2, 3, and 4 and show how it's relevant to filling in the Human Handbook. We are going to have a little 10-minute break in about 35 minutes. Oh, sorry, 5-minute break in 35 minutes. And we're going to do steps 1 and 2 now. We'll have a little break, and then we'll do steps 3 and 4 before we finish, before 5 o'clock today, and have a chance for some questions. Okay, so in about 35 minutes, we're going to have a little rest. If you need to go to the toilet or get a drink or have a bit of time out. Okay. When doing this, when we kind of start off with observation, we normally start with this picture. If you have seen the keynote, you will know the answer to this. For those that haven't, we often show this picture to ask people, what do you see? A lot of people share these responses. They see frustration, stress, despair, hopelessness, anxiety, pressure, exhaustion, burnout, overwhelm, a headache, a struggle, giving up, a panic attack. These are all examples of like when we see somebody in this pose that we make an assumption about an emotional state. And to be fair, this is all learnt behavior. This is learnt from watching films, TV. This is probably seeing friends, partners, colleagues in similar poses. And the answer to all of these sort of these suggestions of what do you see could all be valid. But the problem is it's not in this case. This is a picture of a person holding their head in their hands, looking down, sitting on a chair. That's all it is. This is really important because by thinking that you see despair and overwhelm and anxiety is an example of you using your fast thinking brain. So the observation part is about truly seeing something, not what you think you see. So by seeing that person holding their head and assuming that they are anxious or potentially frightened or overwhelmed, you might go up to them. You might say, oh, are you okay? What's going on? Can I help? And they might be like, I know I just had an itch. They might then be annoyed that you think there is something wrong. And so begins a conversation that is based on a disconnect because somebody's made an assumption about someone else's emotions. And therefore people aren't being seen and heard, and there's lots of misfiring going on. That's not a great way to start a conversation. What would be better is to start it by using true observation, not what you think is evaluation. So this is why we start here at number 1, about what is visible, what we do see. And again, our brilliant brains, they do like to kick in with evaluation quite quickly. Because that is the fast way of dealing with life. You know, oh, we've seen these things before. We will do a memory recall, and we'll I've definitely seen that image of that person holding their hands, or maybe I've experienced, so therefore I must know what that's about. Going to use very little energy to make that assumption. Definitely anxious. And that's all about what you think you see and hear. And what we'd like to do is we'd like to shift away from that fast thinking approach. And as you guessed, move into a slow thinking approach, which is what we would term as observation, which is actually going 317 times 928, makes you stop and go, what am I actually seeing in front of me? What are the facts that I know to be true right this moment in time? For that photo, all I know is there's a person holding their head in their hands, sitting on a chair. That's all I know. So those are the facts that I can work with. Anything else is just an evaluation and an assumption. Probably not going to help me connect with this person, whatever might be going on. So just to sort of test the theory out, is to ask you what is really happening, not what you think may be happening. Now, here's 7 different statements. Which of these statements, if any, are true observations? Have a little read of the statements, and we're going to go into Menti in a second, and we're going to do a little poll to see which statements, if any, do you think are true observations based on the information I've just given you. I'm just going to pause the screen for a second. I will come back to this list of statements. I'm just going to get the Menti up and running. Okay. So, which statements, if any, are true observations? There's an opportunity for you to put in which numbers you feel. I'm now going to go back to the list of statements. There are 7 there. I'll give you a couple of minutes to see which, if any, statements may be a true observation. Going to go to the poll. Oh, okay, we've got somebody with number 1. Okay, someone number 6. Okay, so somebody picked number 1, and just double check, and somebody picked number 5 and number 6. Okay, 1, 5 and 6, and 4 and 7. Okay, well, the majority are correct in this instance, and I would agree with you that statement number 4 and number 7 are indeed true observations. It's a simple fact. No one asked me for my opinion. Opinion is the sort of the trick there. Just no one asked me for an opinion during the meeting. And correct number 7, my boss told me yesterday in the office that I was doing a good job. That's perhaps verbatim what was said, but that is certainly a true fact. Number 1, I can see you're really annoyed with me. I would disagree with that one. That is not a true observation, because annoyed is almost impossible to see as a real fact. Annoyance manifests in lots of different ways in everybody. So it's very hard to truly see annoyance is a feeling, and we can't concretely see that. So we can never truly see someone's emotion. We can certainly feel a response and see symptoms. We don't actually physically see what annoyance is. It's an abstract concept. And 5, my boss always complains I'm not fast enough. Again, there's some clues in here. The word always is essentially an exaggeration. And if the boss had only ever spoken to you every single possible time the boss had ever said something to you, had always made a complaint, then that would be true, but it's unlikely. It sounds like this is more an exaggeration to feel that this is something that is frequent, but that's not the same as always. And the idea of not being fast enough, again, this concept of being fast enough and complaining, they're very abstract. They're quite opinion based. That I don't know how I would see that unless somebody gave me a speed test and I had to achieve a job in a certain set number of minutes, seconds, or a certain distance to be covered. But generally, doing tasks in a workplace, getting things done in time, needs concrete measure rather than just simply fast enough. And number 6, you make it sound so simple. Somebody picked. Simple, again, is a very judgment-based word that's super abstract and different for everybody. We can't hear it. It's an abstract word as opposed to something. So making it sound so simple is something that sits within that world of complete abstraction, and simplicity, again, is entirely dependent on one's personal definition. You would need some concrete measure in order to understand what simple was in this case, and also how you would hear it if you knew it were to be true. Okay, so thank you for sharing your thoughts on that. I'm gonna crack on with the rest of the slides. We'll come back to Menti in a little bit, but for now, we are going to continue this idea of observation, because it's really important we nail this. This is a phrase, this is a bit of self-talk. I definitely said something similar to this. This is based on quite a lot of real life sort of scenarios mashed together. But this is something that you might say to yourself. You know someone who would say this to themselves, or you've heard them utter it between friends or between colleagues. And the phrase is, I'm so stupid, I can't remember what they said. I should be better at all this by now. I'm going to let people down if I don't get this task right, and they're going to think I'm useless. It's quite heavy, okay? It might be someone clearly in a state of stress and pressure in a workplace situation, but it is filled with evaluation, okay? This is definitely not to do with any true observation, but this might be this kind of stuff that we say to ourselves. And if we can't use observation with ourselves, it's very difficult to find observation in others. So we ask that everybody role models how to best practice observing rather than evaluating on your own person before trying it with other people. So just as some clues, because there's some really good words in here that help us understand, again, the difference between evaluation and observation, is the word stupid. It's again, entirely abstract concept. Doesn't actually know we don't know what it looks like. If there's a Mensa test and you score above or below a certain point, maybe you could get an answer, but that's not really about what stupid is. Stupid is an entirely subjective opinion that often is to do with society and others and an imbalance of power than it is about an actual result for yourself as a behavior. I should be better. The word should is a terrible word in the English language. It is used frequently, all the time, especially by me, and it implies that somebody else has the answer. It implies someone else has the power to grant you whether you are good enough, whether you would be better enough or best. And it always implies that someone else has dictated that there's a benchmark and that you are meant to meet that benchmark. The thing is, we actually never know who set that benchmark, and it wasn't you. So this idea of this perpetual cycle of never satisfying a mythical benchmark that someone may or may not have set means you are in that spiral of never knowing if you're enough or good enough or fast enough. And this sets off a cycle of evaluation and stops you observing where you actually are. I'm going to let people down is very similar to that. Like, how do we know if we're letting people down? That would imply that we understood another person intimately about what they would feel like if they were let down, in inverted commas. And this is the same with the idea of right. We try and steer clear of the terms right and wrong. Again, it implies an imbalance of power. Someone must have power to decide what is right and wrong. Now, there can be a right and wrong in terms of the maths equation, but in terms of doing a good job and getting things right by others is a dangerous ground because it's very abstract. We try and avoid that wherever possible. We often try and use the words I agree or disagree rather than you're right or you're wrong. And they're going to think I'm useless. Sadly, well, blessing or a curse, we never know what another human being is thinking. It could solve a lot of world problems, or probably create more if we did. But the idea is we just can't know what other people are thinking, yet we do seem to be driven by the concept that we might be able to. So firstly, we never know what someone else is going to think of us. And also the concept of useless, again, implies it's a bit like stupid. Someone else has dictated how useful you are as a person, and therefore someone else is dictating that you're not. Again, this is a terrible kind of like imbalance of power that this person is also feeding into. We'd love to be able to help this person that's clearly not in a great place, to be able to shift this negative rhetoric into something that's more connected with themselves, to be able to progress us forwards, moving forwards, and maintain dignity and maintain healthy mental well-being. So this is a good start. We're going to turn this into an observation. And actually, all that happened in this situation was I've been given instructions for a task, but I cannot remember the order in which I'm out to follow the instructions, so I don't know how to complete the task. Sounds very dry, and for the example of this exercise, it is. But this is how you would turn something that's full of evaluation into something that's about an observable fact. This simply comes down to somebody couldn't remember the order in which the instructions were to be followed. That has made this person grind to a halt and unable to move forwards, and then generated a set of emotions that are not very pleasant for them to deal with. So the actual observation is simply about an ordering of instructions. So now we've got something new to focus on. So once we've got to the observation part, we've actually now got some non-disputable specific facts we can actually work with, rather than abstract concepts that we can never pin down. That allows us to go below the waterline for the first time. And this is where we get to step 2, which is feelings. And this is the harder bit in a workplace, because I think on the whole, in past years, past generations, the idea is that you leave feelings at home and outside the door, and that feelings really don't have much of a place at work. Now, I'm sure many modern companies embrace things differently, but I still think there's a conditioning of you can't bring the full feeling self to work. Sadly, human beings don't work like that. We do bring our feelings everywhere with us. They are part of who we are. So being able to compress them down and not acknowledge them during work actually just tends to make it worse. And so we advocate for feelings to be discussed with courage and curiosity. They're nothing to be frightened of. We all have them. And it's something that we would advocate is managed within how we connect with people. We don't connect because we shut off from our feelings. We connect because we give context to people by utilizing how we feel. One might say you could shift from being a victim into being engaging with your vulnerability, which we would say is a very positive thing to do. So feelings is like the next bit. Once we've observed the facts, we now need to observe what's actually going on, the real human feelings that have happened. We kind of need to acknowledge that, otherwise we're not going to get very far. But hey, the fast thinking brain, that's kicking in again. It likes to get in there early, and it likes to think. Thoughts love to pop up rather than feelings. I'm a shocker for doing this too. I want to go instantly to thinking about a scenario and people. And how I would define thoughts in this context is that thoughts are how we interpret other people's responses and actions. It's actually all about others rather than about ourselves. We often see the world as this sort of big mirror, really, but immediately we're wanting to get a sense of an emotion. We're like, oh, someone's angry with me, or that person is miserable because I did something. Constantly thinking our emotions are entirely interlinked with other people. And that's actually thoughts as opposed to genuine feelings. Here are some thoughts, words, and some judgments. And often you'll find people saying, I feel unsupported. I feel unheard. I feel rejected. I feel pressured. I feel taken for granted. I feel overworked. I feel neglected. Now, I personally have said all of those things, probably still do. but they aren't feelings. But we do like to put the word feel in front of these. And really what our body and mind are trying to say is that these are thoughts we're having, but actually we kind of get a bit stuck because we then assume this is how we're feeling. And there's something that links all of these words. It's a common thread here. All of those are about other people and other things. They're not actually about what's going on inside of you. These are all about your relationship to others. Somebody not hearing you, somebody not doing something for you, so you are let down, somebody not attending or supporting you or caring for you, somebody not caring about your workload and adding more. So these are feelings that are actually to do with how you're interpreting other people's actions towards yourself. And as much as they might be all valid, when we're trying to use this method, this framework, we kind of need to get past this so we can actually understand what actually is going on in your body with your own sets of emotions rather than how you're interpreting others. This is why we try and employ the slow thinking brain to be able to describe feelings. And feelings are a description of our physical and psychological responses. So basically trying to ground yourself in your body a little bit better and actually go, what is going on, rather than interpreting or analysing the situation. So feelings words, feelings like little bubbles popping up to the water surface. Fearful, confident, confused, frustrated, anxious, secure, angry, calm. There are lots of words one could use as human emotion feelings. And we can call them out, or we can find out better words that might describe how you feel. And these are the words we would like to sort of utilize wherever possible. But for some, and particularly for neurodivergent clients that I've worked with, actually finding the right words really hard. And for a lot of people, just neatly being able to put your emotion into a word that appears in a dictionary isn't ideal. And so sometimes it can also be helpful to think of the symptoms of feelings, like what is physically going on in your body. Doesn't mean you have to give it a perfect name and call it out. It means that you can identify and recognize something is shifting in your body. There is a response that you're having that is triggered by your emotions. So that can be an obvious one about having a panic attack or crying. But it could also be people that have migraines or headaches that get super hot and sweaty, get a fast heartbeat, get itchy skin, or tics that start developing, nail biting or skin picking, making fists and having very tense muscles. You might notice when you are relaxed and your muscles are relaxed versus when you are holding tension, perhaps on your shoulders. And all of these are signs that you're having an emotional response. And they're often a really good place to start, even if you can't just go, oh, I'm definitely angry or anxious. Maybe you just feel a bit, that's okay. As long as you can recognize and stop and go, that's what I'm feeling right now. That's a really good place to get to. So we're going to jump to Menti for 2 seconds, and we are going to ask you some questions about feelings now, if you are willing to participate. I want to ask if you could describe a feeling that you've experienced this week. This is a way to check that we aren't going into thoughts, that you are describing a genuine feeling that you've experienced this week. If you're willing, if you would like to just put a fictional one, that's fine. Doesn't have to draw on your personal experience. If you don't feel comfortable, that's all good. But maybe describe a feeling that you've experienced. And I know it's only Wednesday, so the week is halfway through. But let's see if you've can pinpoint anything that you've had. No. Oh, feeling stuck. I like that. That's that hasn't come very often, but I think that's actually a really good word. Feeling satisfied, great. Happiness, but also tired and drained. Feeling contented, but there's been some anger. Been some sad. People have been thankful and had some worries. Happily in the flow. Oh, I like that. Hyper focus. Brilliant. Okay. There's a big range of emotions there. And empathy with anybody who's had a tough week already and put any of the sort of negative words. I'm sorry the week has been like that already. I obviously hope it improves. And I know our feelings are something that come and go and will change, always change into something else, which gives us a tiny bit of hope. But thank you for being honest and sharing your thoughts. So yeah, there's great concepts there in terms of like feelings. This is a great place to start. And don't forget, obviously, everyone you work with will also have experienced a ton of different feelings that week, and it does affect how you turn up at work and be yourself. Okay, I'm just going to go to the next one, and I want to ask. When we think about feelings now, I want to ask, how do you feel when having to make a phone call? Now, this is kind of how we can put this into practice, is about you've had some experiences of feelings, but like, okay, can you imagine yourself making a phone call at work? How do you feel? So same kind of words. Can we now translate that to making a phone call? Fine, but some people feel apprehensive. Irritated and confident, again. Normal but anxious in the past. Okay, so something that's changed. Expecting, frustrated, stressed. Okay, hesitant. Okay. A lot of people are using the word anxious. Okay, unassertive, but dread. Okay, so like an empowered and overthinking. Okay, again, like that's a wide variety of people here. I mean, anxious seems to have come out on top, which is interesting. But as you can see, that everybody has a slightly different set of feelings when it comes to doing simple thing like making a phone call. I'm going to go on to the next slide. Just pause that one there. We're going to ask a very similar question. How do you feel when having to read and respond to emails? You don't have to imagine yourself as a corgi wearing glasses. You know, if you want to, that's totally fine by me. But that's just the corgi is feeling fine, excellent. Corgi is feeling calm, energized. Oh, but there's some apathy going on and tired and frustrated. Okay, feeling neutral about emails, feeling calm, feeling bored, but some feel focused. Okay. I've got sort of focused, excited for opportunity, detail, focus. Okay, it gives people focus. Okay, some make some people anxious though. Okay. So we've got focus is coming through. So quite different from anxious with regards to the phone call. Okay. Any more? No. Okay. Oh, okay. 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 So this is an opportunity to see again huge diverse range of feelings here. Now I want to go back to the screen, and I want to sort of now translate this back into the feelings of forgive me feelings of this person. So now we've kind of thought about the feelings. I want to think about this person. So this person is feeling confused and anxious, and that actually they don't understand the instructions and they're unsure how to ask for help. So what we've managed to do is we've managed to now understand that these are the feelings in this person. Okay, they couldn't remember the instructions, but actually rather than going to words stupid and useless, we've actually identified now that this person's actually just feeling confused and anxious. A bit anxious, like making a phone call. You know, this person is in a state of confusion and is now worried and perhaps is a bit sort of in freeze mode because they're paralyzed about actually and unsure how to ask for help. So this is really helpful to us because we've actually sort of now bypassed all of those abstract, useless words that don't get us any further. But now actually we have a concrete idea about confusion and anxiety. Okay, so the idea is that no one directly creates your feelings. Only you create the feelings inside of you. This is the absolute crux of what we do. So this idea that words, actions, and events can trigger symptoms of feelings, but they are not the cause. This idea of angry, scared, sad, happy are actually manifestations within ourselves. No other human being generates these feelings for us. And it's about the fact that your needs are being unmet or your needs are being met or unmet that actually generate the feelings, not another person. Often we can say our partners or family, they make us so happy, or our bosses make us so angry. Actually, the idea is that no other person can generally make our feelings feel so, make our feelings in us. Only us. Only our needs being met or unmet can actually cause the feelings, which is really exciting because it means that no person has the power to make you feel. No one is responsible for creating your feelings. So therefore, you are never responsible for creating feelings in others. That's really important. You are never responsible for creating feelings in others. This is particularly important when you're in a leadership, managerial position. As much as we'd like to make people okay, we actually can't create feelings in people. We can't make people happy. We also can't make people sad. That's because there's a need inside of each one of us that's being met or unmet. And that is what generates a set of feelings. This is really important so that we never get into the realm of taking things personally. So the feelings, these feelings are the emotions you experience. This is, you think about making a phone call or having an email. Those are the feelings we're trying to always latch onto. And so I wanted to show, because we did this Mentimeter before for a much larger group, and I wanted to show what the responses were from people. And so we had, weirdly, this very similar idea that the word anxious came to the fore for making a phone call. 77 different responses here. And we had stressed and nervous. We had calm, and we had some people that were eager and fine and okay. But this shows a vast range of emotions, that feelings were happening. This obviously is helpful if you're a boss that's okay with phone calls, to not assume that everybody else is, and vice versa, really. And perhaps that communications can be better catered to a range of the way that people have feelings and emotional responses, particularly if you have to make a lot of phone calls within the workplace. And we also asked the same thing about emails. And in this particular session, actually, most people were overwhelmed, but we also had an equal balance of relaxed and calm. So obviously, it's an improvement on phone calls. But again, as you can see, there's lots of different ways of having feeling responses. So it's really good to ask sometimes these questions, because it helps people feel more comfortable talking about their feelings in the workplace. And they can be something as simple as talking about how do you feel about emails and phone calls. It's a great way to role model that feelings are okay to talk about. So this is why it's relevant to the communication preferences, the first box to fill in the Human Handbook. So I do this thing where I actually really love the phone call. I find emails a little bit overwhelming because I never really truly sense tone. And I think tone's very hard to get across, but much easier when I'm having a phone call. But I kind of just talk about like what kind of phone call. So like if you want to share and discuss, but if you want to have a super lengthy kind of information sharing session, it might be better that we have that written down. I can't stand long voicemails or voice notes. People sending me 17-minute long voice notes. It's like I have to get up out of paper. I have to make bullet points. I have to, like, have cliff notes just to kind of, prep before being able to return the information. I find that too much for me. For some people, it's a brilliant way to get information rather than having to read a lot. So everyone is different. And I think it's always important that you think about what creates the best set, most positive emotions within you. Emails is a great one, like what kind of information, or how many times you might be copied on a thread, for example. And also when you think it's achievable that you'll respond to people before it generates worry in you. Similarly, other like Slack channels, Discord, any other that kind of like Teams chat that we use, and like WhatsApp and like how direct messaging work, how socials might work for you. You can also boundary as to where good positive emotions come from. So the first thing we would ask you to do, we suggest that the first place to start is filling in the communication preferences. The best way to start is by thinking about the feelings that you have, particularly around phone calls and emails. So this is a great sort of like leaping off point to start filling in the Human Handbook. Start here and think about the things that we've just discussed. You'll be given obviously a little template, but we tend to offer that you can talk about when you prefer a phone call is a good way, rather than when to phone, and what emails might be best for, like the types of information, and the other do's and don'ts. And that could be around sort of social media, perhaps other ways of messaging you, and what you feel is appropriate, perhaps that falls in line with your own work-life balance, and when's okay to contact you. I have a particular issue of people contacting me through multiple platforms and formats. I prefer always to keep it on one. Otherwise, you've got to go searching for lots of bits of information. So things like that might be helpful for you in this section. Right, that's enough talking for me. You get a break for 5 minutes. If you can come back at 4:05, that would be amazing. Please use that time to get a drink, have a toilet break if you need to. I'm going to turn my camera and mic off, and I will return back online in 5 minutes' time, and we will continue with parts 3 and 4. So I will see you very shortly. Okay, thank you. Okay, welcome back. Hope you've had an opportunity to stretch your legs or grab a glass of water. We're going to continue now, and we're going to look at parts 3 and 4 in terms of how to complete the rest of your Human Handbook. And we're going to do probably the most tricky section, which is the needs section. Needs often creates a bit of an eye roll with people. I'm like, oh, our big needs, what do we need as a person? Is this sort of psychobabble? Often it can be. It is obviously frequently mentioned within psychotherapies about what your inner needs are. I'd like to frame it slightly differently, so it's a little bit more accessible and perhaps a little more related to workplaces, and sort of offer a better route in, rather than feeling like we're like in the world of therapy all of a sudden. So the needs are an important part. As we said, the feelings that we had, that are like little flags waving, going, yeah, there's a need that's being met or unmet here that's generating my emotional state. And generally, we would say that our feelings, our positive feelings are because needs are being met, and our negative feelings are because our needs are being unmet. So good to know which needs we need to meet and which ones we can kind of say have been satisfied. So I'm going to jump back into Menti to just see what we think about needs here. And I want to ask, might seem like a random question, but bear with me. I want to know, what emotions do you experience when you've had a bad night's sleep? This is how we're going to start looking at needs. Maybe the pug will inspire you. But what emotions do you experience when you've had a bad night's sleep? Maybe you've never had a bad night's sleep. That's amazing. Maybe you can think about somebody who you know sleeps badly and reflect on perhaps what emotions you've noticed in them, if that does not apply to you. Okay, frustration, despair. Okay. I generally hate people when I've had a bad night's sleep. So I had a great night's sleep last night, by the way. So I'm loving people today. But it's interesting how much I change. Mood fluctuations, yeah, definitely. Okay, feeling hopeless, feeling anxious, short-tempered, yeah, annoyance, annoyed, feeling aggravated, being testy, yeah, being dysfunctional, yeah. Being able to get on with things can often feel very difficult. Regret, okay, interesting. Lack of control, okay. Frustration is coming out top here. And annoyance with other human beings, I would imagine. Okay, fatigue. Fatigue is a physical one, yes, understood. Weak feeling, yes. Okay, feeling out of it. Okay, great. Yeah, great. Some really good. Feeling pointless. Yeah, okay, great range of emotion words there. And very interesting, as you can probably imagine, that we all actually do have quite a different emotional response when we haven't had a bad night's sleep. We are not the same in that respect. You can imagine a bunch of people not sleeping well, turning up to work and start, sharing all of these emotions. So I'm going to go back and give you some hope as to just like, why does this happen? Because it's useful to know the science behind why you are having those emotions, because often it's got nothing to do with your psychological history, makeup, other things that might be going on in your life. There's actually a real practical neurological reason why this happens. And it's all to do with this. This is the amygdala, which you probably have heard of. If you haven't, it's a powerful seat in the middle of your brain. Sometimes it's referred to as the lizard brain. It's the oldest part of our brains, and it's the sort of seat of our raw emotions, is a very blunt way of describing it. It is very powerful. They are powerful emotions that keep us alive. Actually, they're kind of like where often our instinct for survival will come from, and our sort of state of being as a human. It's quite primal, shall we say, as a part of our brain. A powerful bit, very small, powerful. And then we have this thing called the prefrontal cortex. Now, the prefrontal cortex, as you can imagine, it's a logic part. It's a logic part of your brain. It's like a beautiful grid. It is filled with logic, reason, perspective, and what it does is it encases the amygdala. It kind of It's linked to it to keep it in check. It's the way of finding balance, shall we say. And so the prefrontal cortex brings us wonderful logic and reason to our very primal emotions. And when we sleep, they have found that the bond between the two is maintained, it's kept strong, so that both are kept in check, that we don't just completely become devoid of emotion, nor do our emotions completely run riot and take over, that we are able to sort of function as beings. You may remember when you've had a really good night's sleep, things just feel balanced and calm, and one won't wake up in the moment. Now, when we have a bad night's sleep, actually what happens is called an amygdala hijack. This is where the bond between the two is broken. They don't know exactly why, but when we have poor sleep, poor quality or not enough sleep, the bond between the two is no longer maintained. And so the amygdala, it runs riot. The prefrontal cortex can no longer keep this one in check, okay? No logical reason or perspective is going to touch this one. It's just a ton of primal emotions. And this is why you feel totally anxious, ragey, testy, overwhelmed, depressed. All of these big emotional feelings in the morning when you've had a poor night's sleep is actually because of this. There's not necessarily anything wrong with you. It's the fact that the sort of the two parts of the brain have uncoupled because of night. Now, if this continues, then this amygdala hijack can develop into mental health concerns, i.e. just poor mental health, for example. But a good night's sleep will probably repair this bond and you'll be able to find perspective. This is largely why people say sleep on it when you're particularly trying to solve a problem or you're particularly trying to sort of deal with a difficult situation. There is actually, weirdly, some biological logic at the heart of that concept. So this is what's going on. And because of this sort of understanding of sleep, we know what we kind of need for good sleep health. Like, we know that it needs to be dark. We know that having warm, low-level lighting before we go to sleep, no screens. We know that it should be quiet. We know that probably consistently going to bed and rising at the similar times is helpful. We know not to have 27 shots of espresso before we go to bed. And we also know that we need to drop our body temperature by a core body temperature by 1 degree in order for us to actually fall asleep, which is why we know when it's really hot, particularly in the UK, that we all sleep quite badly if you don't have better ventilation, or it's just too hot, the air is too hot to sleep, which is generally why people then have poor sets of emotions the next day. So there's lots of things that we could do to address these needs, these physical needs, in order to improve sleep health, and prevent the amygdala hijacking our brains. And so physical needs is a great place to start when thinking about how we operate as people, particularly at work. Now, anyone who has particular access needs and access requirements and reasonable adjustments is probably a few steps ahead of this, but it's great if everybody's up to speed with like kind of what the body needs in a space. We aren't walking heads that come into work, we are whole bodies. And if our whole body is not having its needs attended to, how on earth are we then expected to find connection with others if we can't actually even connect with the needs that we have in ourselves? So it's important we put ourselves in a place of comfort and ease before, again, trying to connect with people. And that goes with the empathy of other people's needs too. So particularly if working with those who would class themselves as neurodivergent, there are plenty of people that have an issue with touch. So even like a handshake can cause quite a lot of anxiety, or being hugged, or this idea of familiar sort of, arm touching or shoulder touching, just as a good intentioned way of kind of bonding, does not work for some people. This idea of sound can be incredibly triggering for people. I have an auditory processing and some hearing issues where loud noises and things I find incredibly disruptive, like, and quite anxiety inducing. Some people need to put headphones on and to concentrate, not because they want to be rude or not participate, but they need to focus and drown out other interfering noises. That also goes for like the body's temperature. So this idea of anybody suffering from perimenopausal and menopausal symptoms, for example, will be really suffering if it's too hot, or if you have any other medical conditions or anything that is affecting kind of like a fluctuating body temperature, places being too hot and too cold are really going to be difficult for you to kind of access your connective self if you're constantly in a state of discomfort. And that goes for lighting too. There's an awful lot of issues around neurodivergence and harsh overhead lighting. But I think that's also true for a lot of people, whether it feels something, if it's the right color temperature, is there enough daylight? Are we balancing our routine? Are we seeing enough daylight and getting outside? Various things that actually it's important to consider when you're actually in a workspace. Some of it might not be practical to be able to adjust, but I think it's important that you think about yourself. Like, what does your body like in a space? It can be the chair you're sat on, where you like to sit, where you like your back facing, or what you like to be watching, or do you like to be in a massive busy throng, or actually do you really need private quiet space? Once we've done that, then we can then move on to the psychological needs. And the way we want to do this is actually kind of thinking about words and definitions of words that are yours. As we said, our emotions and behaviors are signals from the body and the brain letting us know whether or not our physical and psychological needs are being met. When a person's needs are met, they experience positive mental health and resilient physical well-being. The secret is, though, how do we actually get our needs met at all? And so the way we do it is like we firstly have to define it. We have to go, okay, what is going on? We can't meet them if we don't know what they are. It's the sort of biggest problem. People say, what do you need? A lot of people say, I don't know. Okay, so we need to figure out what those needs are. And sometimes that needs a bit of help. And that's what this step is about. So we're going to go back to our person. We don't want them hanging there in a state of anxiety and confusion. But we found out that they're feeling confused and anxious, okay? They're unsure how to ask for help. So they're probably in a bit of a state of paralysis here. So we need to figure out what those needs are. Now, like me, like many other people, I probably try and figure out and analyze what I need. But the needs are probably connected to like everybody else. Well, I feel anxious because there isn't much time left to sort this. So it's time's fault. I feel unsure because everyone seems too busy to help. That's because everyone's too busy. That's the busyness is the fault. I feel unsure because no one's given me a copy of instructions on the email. Okay, so that was someone else's fault who didn't give me the email. I feel confused because the person giving instruction was talking too fast. Maybe I didn't have a chance to write it down. So speed is a problem here. I feel anxious because they're putting so much pressure on me. Okay, so like it's the pressure that is the reason that I forgot. But the problem with that is all of that is about who is to blame. And when we get into the blame game of I feel sad because you left me out, I feel angry because I didn't get the job, I feel anxious because they haven't paid me. These are all to do with, therefore, blaming your feelings on other people and other things happening. So that's a problem because we can't satisfy your needs if we think it's everybody else's actions that have to change in order for your needs to be met. That's the bit we have to break, the cycle we have to break. This idea that an other person is responsible for meeting your needs. For example, I need you to do better to make me feel less overwhelmed. I need this job to be over so I can feel okay. I need the doctor to call me so I can stop worrying. I need you to respect my space more so I feel safe. This is all a very transactional way of looking at needs. Problem with that is that it's an instant disconnect. All we're doing now is loading up the other person with the weird lines coming out their head on the right-hand side. We're loading them up with responsibility. And they might not be happy about that. In fact, if anything, they might be angry about it. They might be confused. They might be anxious themselves and unsure. So you almost set off a spiral of all of these negative feelings in somebody else now. And we certainly aren't going to get your feelings sorted or we're actually going to get any needs met. So when we make needs this transactional thing, then all we do is just like it's a game of tennis. It's like we just disconnect from each other. We just keep hitting at each other and actually we don't really make much progress. And so what we're trying to do is break this particular sort of cycle into something else. This cycle is a strategy cycle. So again, brains love to do this, particularly at work. You go to your fast thinking brain, which is a strategy. Oh, well, if you do this, then I'll feel better. Oh, I need you to change so that this will feel better for me. This is all about external directions and demands and instructions. Like, if you do something for me, then I'm going to feel better. It's a lot of that's a lot of pressure to put on somebody else, and a lot of pressure to put on things. You know, I'll feel safe as long as I have enough money in the bank, or I feel like I'm making progress as long as I get that job. You know, that sets up a lot of expectation and pressure. Might be a good strategy, but it's not really going to meet your base needs here, because that's just going to be a stopgap. What if those things don't happen? What if those things don't comply? What about your needs then? So the strategy part is something we'd like to shift away from, the fast thinking brain. We need to like slow it down. I mean, to shift it into realizing that we have needs, not strategies. And those needs are internal requirements. They are things that you need inside yourself. We aim to take responsibility of our feelings rather than others. So I feel anxious because I need security. I feel angry because I need transparency. I feel overwhelmed because I need more information. You know, I need knowledge, or I need to up my skill. You know, those are ways of looking at what our internal needs are, because they're generating our feelings. They ain't got anything to do with anybody else. They're ours. Now, I do believe that you have to find your own words. Lots of psychologists say that there's the sort of the core 5 or the 7. Everyone thinks that there is a sort of fundamental list of human needs that underpin most psychologies and psychotherapies, and some part that might be true. But I feel that does somewhat take away the autonomy from you as a person, that actually your needs are something that continually evolve in your life, and the words that you need to find for yourself, and definitions that feel right to you, rather than some definitions that some top philosophers and psychologists over time have come up with. Because what my need of security means to me will be completely different from what it means to you. So the aim is to find your own sets of words, and we would encourage you to do that. I'm going to offer lots of words here. Some of them might appeal, some of them might be right, or none of them fit at all. But I'm going to give you 3 big words, in which is like a category of words that you could think about, and it helps you figure out your needs according to these 3 categories, however you choose to define it. And these are some of the needs words that we'd like to sort of start using. And we start using this idea of capability. We start thinking about needs to do with just you in a desk at work. How you start with your body and your space. How can you just be capable today at work, sat at your desk? What are the things that you naturally need as a person to feel capable today, a body at a desk? You know, for me personally, I love clarity. It's very hard to get on with tasks, so I'm really, really unclear with things, or that there's a real lack of transparency, so I'm constantly second guessing. I hate that. It really upsets me if I don't really fully understand the bigger picture. But I also appreciate, you know, being given direction. I like to make sure that we are not wasting our time and energies going in the wrong way. And for some people, having routine is really critical just to be capable. But for some people, variety is what they thrive on. They need something different every day. Otherwise, it really affects their capability. So capability is a good starting place. Then we make the circle a little bit bigger, and we move into this concept of community. So thinking about the immediate people around you, perhaps in your team, in your workplace. Maybe you have a small organization, or you have a big one, and you work in small teams. So starting to think about your needs in reference to how you operate as a mini community. So what are the things that are important? So for example, collaboration and cooperation. So you actually need to feel that people want to collaborate with you. You feel that you would like to have cooperation, that you're not working in an isolated way, for example, that there is a teamwork going on. You like the idea of sharing information. Perhaps support and empathy and care is critical to you. that if someone, recognizes that something's going on for you, that that there is a system of support and caring in place, perhaps feeling included or a sense of belonging. That could be through who is role modeling in that community. But generally, do you feel like you belong there? Do you have solidarity? Maybe there's a justice issue within the community or the sector that you're working in. Do you feel safe, primarily? Those are all kind of needs words that might be relevant to you and how you feel like you're part of a team. Even if you're managing a team, it's still a community. So what needs do you have? And then we make the circle even bigger, and we zoom right out here, and we think about you and your entire career pathway, or pathway, if it's not a career, you and the choices that you make throughout your life, throughout your working life. So step outside of your building and organization for a minute and think about just where you're heading. And you'll have needs around that too. A lot of it can be to do with you making progress, so you feel like you're being challenged enough. Do you actually have enough freedom? And that sense of feeling like you have respect, really, potentially for your experience and your opinion and your voice, perhaps. Is there enough balance between your work and your home life? And do you have, I don't know, do you have enough creativity, perhaps, being stifled by creativity? So, are you being able to be sustained by the work that you're doing? Do you feel the work is ethically sustainable? So this idea of your needs around the big choices around career is also important. So we try and think about those three bubbles: capability, community, and choice, and use those as your anchors to think about the needs that you have as a person, not only from your practical needs and inside the office, but you in terms of where you are going as a person, whether that is continuing to manage and lead people, or you have your sights on other sort of side steps into other career pathways. So we go back to our triangle, go back to our iceberg, and we sort of just put this into practice now. So when your needs are being met, just to sort of clarify the point, we might have a feeling of happiness. And we might see somebody happy, or they might say they're happy. But underneath, the next step down in the iceberg, these are all the things that could be going on. So that person could feel supported. That's why they're happy. They could actually feel a sense of freedom. Maybe they've got a sense of achievement. Maybe something is completed and they feel a great sense of achievement. Happiness, because achievement is an important need for them. Maybe they felt accepted or included in the workspace, and actually that's brought a sense of happiness. Maybe they found peace, making progress. And for me, there's a dog. As long as there's a dog involved, I'm happy. So that's why I put that in there. But this idea of happiness is obviously, we see it as one simple word, but why we're happy and what need is being met will be different to each and every one of us. And it's really important that you know what needs of yours are being met that actually translates to your own happiness. It's really good to be able to call that out and recognize that might evolve over time as your life changes and things happen to you. So if we go the other side, though, we go into this concept of anger. So anger is an emotion that most of us have experienced within ourselves, within people close to us, or we've just seen it demonstrated in society. But anger, again, is just like happiness. It's just a word, and it can reveal that there are loads of unmet needs that are causing that anger. It is not straightforward at all, and everybody expresses anger in completely different ways, but also that their anger is rooted in this idea that there's lots of different types of needs not being met. And anger is a really tricky one because it immediately wants us to disconnect. But if we connected with somebody who's angry, or we were able to connect with anger, we would hopefully understand perhaps what those deeper needs are that aren't being met, to be able to move past the discomfort of anger. So and I have met a lot of this in my time in my career, a lot of angry people. But actually what I have learned is that a lot of people weren't feeling very safe, particularly working with the freelance sectors, with people with work instability. It's interesting, those that are angry tend to be feeling actually very frightened. They're frightened of a lack of security and safety and stability. I personally have been angry when there's been a real challenge to my integrity about the way to do things, what I think is morally right. And if that's challenged, it generates a sense of anger in me. A failure in honesty, for me, creates a sense of anger. But also for some, not making progress, not having recognition, can actually really bubble away at people and create a sense of anger. And often those that don't feel very cared for or supported can transition into anger. I have watched and worked with those that have been accused of bullying in the workplace and tried to understand the pathway to those becoming accused of bullying. Often it is rooted in the fact that they didn't feel cared and supported for in the first place, and it is sadly manifested into poor behaviour and unprofessional behaviour and misconduct happening, but kind of rooted into the fact that they didn't feel cared for, sadly didn't know how to ask to be cared for and discuss that. So it's never quite clear cut, and understanding the complexity is absolutely critical in understanding that there are many, many needs that aren't being met. Not for us to analyse somebody else, but for us to consider that there's lots of needs that could be unmet, and how could we find a space for these needs to be met together collaboratively. So I'm going to do a check-in again with you, Mentee. I want to ask a question about thinking about if we were to fill in the same triangle, but for the word worried. If you saw somebody worried or yourself was worried, what out of all the words that I've shown already, what could be the needs that are unmet that are generating that feeling of worry in somebody? So I'm just going to pop to another dog. What unmet needs could be the cause of feeling worried? Any ideas as to what could be going on? And this could be in reference to yourself or people you know, or you could just make it up in terms of using the words that you've already seen on the slides today. It doesn't have to be personal experience if you don't feel comfortable sharing. Yep, lack of security often comes up top of the list, but lack of clarity, yeah, definitely. A lack of understanding. Yeah, lack of breakdown in communication. Lack of visibility, like that, it's a good one. Yeah, being given ambiguity over things, I can imagine would absolutely cause a lot of worry because you'll never know what it is you're supposed, where the parameters are. Having a lack of assurance, yeah, definitely. Lack of feedback, yeah, that's a great one in terms of like having that two-way street, that kind of cooperation and communication with people. Lack of safety, emotional safety, definitely. Okay. The lack of capacity, I like that. That's a good one. That's a wise word to put in terms of if you know you've only got so much and people keep asking more of you, and if your capacity is not understood, that can be very difficult. A lack of trust. Yep. Okay, so interesting. So uncertainty and lack of security and lack of assurance sort of coming out. So yes, often that worry can be to do with those sets of unmet needs. But interesting that there is an opportunity there for there to be lots of different types of unmet needs. And that's really the point, that when we see someone worried, we don't just focus on what we think they're worried about. We actually see if we can understand what are those deeper unmet needs and how we can generate empathy with them in order to find out how we can meet those needs together. Okay, I'm going to pause that there for a second and come to our person. So we've understood that they're feeling confused and anxious. And actually the real need this person has is a need for clarity and support. They've needed that all along. They just weren't able to communicate that. For them to recognize they need clarity and support is something, now they've called it out, is something that we can all work together now to figure out. So this isn't anything to do with them reassuring that they're not useless and stupid. We could spend ages going, oh no, you're not, you're great, this is going to be fine. And actually that gets us nowhere. When actually really we want this person to be able to understand that their feeling of confusion is because they have a real need for clarity. So now we need to go and define what clarity is and how we get it. So rather than just having people placate you by saying, no, you're not stupid and you're not going to let anyone down, you're actually going, right, okay, so if you have a need for clarity, what can we do about that? How can we work together? And that not only kind of is going to be more helpful in the scenario and actually solve a situation, it's also going to help others understand this person a bit better, particularly a boss, who goes, actually, this person really values clarity. I don't want them to feel like this again. So perhaps the next time we can ensure that there is clarity and support put into place, not only for them, but maybe for everyone else too. So actually being able to get to the needs place, we've now understood something much more about this person. We've been able to connect with them. More importantly, I think this is a way that we can generate empathy. So if someone said, oh, I'm feeling stupid and useless, often a colleague might be going, no, you're fine. You're great. It was just this. It was just that. That's not very empathetic, actually. In fact, that's quite disconnecting, because that's just sort of not actually hearing the person really what they're saying. When actually someone says, I'm actually really feeling confused and anxious, the majority of the time someone will be like, oh, okay, I'll be empathetic here. That's sad that person is feeling confused and anxious. It just makes you stop and maybe want to care for that person in a slightly different way rather than placate them. And now if they're saying that they need clarity, you've got a handle on what it is that those feelings are connected to. So you're more likely to generate a sense of empathy between them. You're not being responsible for it. You're not trying to make them feel better, but you have a better context behind them to allow you to connect with them. Because no one else can meet your needs except yourself. Sadly, it's not a single person on the planet that can meet your needs. You have to do the work yourself. You kind of need to know what it is that isn't being met and get a sense of what could happen in order for the need to be met. The aim is for you to share that with people, not make anyone else feel responsible for doing that or getting your needs met for you. When you figure that out yourself and you share it is when we start connecting with people. As I say, when you generate an empathy between you. So needs, not strategy. So these are often the sort of the top needs that we think about, and remembering that these aren't strategies we're asking. We're actually sort of thinking about your fundamental needs as a person. So some of these words are really helpful about like how maybe progress is important, or what does progress look like to you? What does belonging actually look like? Honesty, recognition. Think of concrete examples of when you receive this. Like, you need to know, if you wanted these needs, how are you going to get them? What does it actually look like? Is support somebody kind of magically reading your mind, or is support going, I've got a nominated person I can go and speak to, or I've asked for a mentor and I would feel supported if I knew I had a mentor to speak to, for example. So being able to have needs, as long as you can line it up with actually concretely how you get your needs met, is a great first step in figuring out how to request what it is that you want. This is why it's relevant to the next box in your Human Handbook, and the bit that says what I need. Now, this could be as simple as what you physically need in the space, or it could be something bigger that covers those bigger needs that we've just discussed. I don't know what that is. That is up for you to explore. And maybe you can have a stab at this and maybe it will evolve over time. But those sort of fundamental needs are about what you're asking for here is about those ensuring any unmet needs aren't going to sort of cause a spiral of really unpleasant emotions for you. So for me, on a very practical level, I do struggle to hear in busy, noisy spaces. I like chatting to people face, but it's great where it happens. So I'm going to offer that. I need to know where it's going to physically happen. I like to meet people in person, so it's a great connection. Sleep health is important, the physical part. And also, like my perimenopausal state, as I'm getting older, I'm experiencing lots of things that even I'm struggling to deal with. So I'm calling that out. I'm just saying, if I'm irritable and it irritates you, that we could have a conversation about that. But just being honest and putting that out there. I'm not apologizing for anything, but I am offering that those are bits that you might need to know about me that could affect how we would connect. So that's the needs, the root cause of our feelings. And something that is this is all work in progress, something that probably will take a little bit of time for you to think about and consider. The more you talk about it with peers and friends and family, the easier this gets to find, and you realise there's probably quite a lot of common ground amongst the people you know. And then finally, the fourth step, the request step, which is ultimately what the completion of the Human Handbook is really. And the requesting is partly what we will look at in part 2, but we're going to sort of do the crux of it now, but we will continue that conversation in a couple of weeks' time when you return to part 2. So just to go back to this person, because they found out they need clarity and support, but they still haven't done the task. We still need to help them. We still need to move this one forwards so that they can complete their task. So the natural question would be like, well, what can I ask for that will give me clarity and support and help me complete the task? Well, I can't answer that for them, but we can think about giving them some great language tools in order to know how to ask. Our fast thinking brain loves to take over at this point, and we need to ask it to just step aside for a minute, because it likes to demand things, particularly when we're in a place of discomfort. We do want to move past it as quickly as possible because it's not very nice. So we often demand things happen so that we can move beyond these feelings, we can get our needs met, and just get on with the day. And in the workplace, we're so often used to speaking in the world of demands, directing others to comply, because that's about a power hierarchy, but also that's to do with speed and pressure, and the fact that, you know, we are paid to be there, and there's a contract as to why we're there. So different conditions are put into place, but we can still do better. We can still improve on this and shift away from the traditional sense of demanding people do things and into something else, because demanding is ultimately disconnecting. This person could say, you need to stop being confusing when giving me instructions. I mean, it's pretty brutal. It might be true, but it's pretty brutal. And if I received that, I probably wouldn't want to help. You know, that's a pretty disconnecting way to speak to somebody. It might be true that they were confusing, but it feels like the blame has entirely been put on this person's shoulders, and that's not going to want to make them help get this person's needs met. It's not going to make me want to give them clarity and support, because that's a human response if we feel attacked in that way. And demanding can feel quite attacking. And the reason why is when we sort of disconnect, we tend to sort of fall into these traps. The one in the middle, so I'm going to start with, is not knowing what you actually want. As I said, if you don't know what it is that's going to meet your needs, no one else is going to. So not being able to articulate what it is that you need isn't going to help anyone, which means it's not going to connect with people. People need something to connect with. They often need something physical and tangible and real to be able to go, I get it. I get what it is that you need. And that kind of is why we end up falling into two things. One is negative language and the other one is vague words. So negative language is, we think we get our needs met by saying, could you stop doing that? Or could you, yeah, don't do that. Don't do that action anymore, because then I'll feel like my need is being met. The problem with don't is the human brain doesn't understand the word don't. It's just a bunch of letters. Don't isn't actually a command that would actually undo knowing in the brain. If I asked you all to don't think of a blue penguin, you probably thought of a blue penguin, because the brain doesn't understand the word don't in front of an imagery idea, a bit like don't press the big red button. Everyone wants to press the big red button. So this idea of the negative language is really quite useless in the English language, because it's really confusing what it is you're actually asking for, but it actually steers us to keeps steering us towards the very thing that you don't want to happen. You then focus on the thing you don't want to happen rather than the thing that you do want to happen. And when we want to connect with people, we want to be really clear with them. What do you actually want? And if you just say what you don't want, they're still really clueless as to what it is you do want. So it provokes quite a lot of resistance and further disconnect. So like even people say, could you just stop saying X, Y, Z? The thing is to say is, what would you like me to say instead? It's very important to put it into the positive. Vague words are just as bad, really, like do better. What does that mean? Again, super hard for other people to interpret. So when we're requesting, a lot of what you're going to ask for to get those needs met needs to be kind of relatively concrete, so people understand where you're heading, not where you're running away from. Obviously, giving context of feelings and needs is critical. This is why we deeply encourage you to follow the steps 1, 2, 3, and 4. If you just jump to 4, people really don't understand where you've come from, and it can be really blindsiding. So it's always important to give people context so they can get up to speed with what your feelings and perhaps your needs are, so they understand the request. They're more likely to come on board with you. And then a lot of the time, people can't necessarily help there and then. And some people just give up straight away. And if it's unfulfilled, your request, and you react without empathy, i.e. you're just like, well, they don't care. Immediately, someone's not helping me, so therefore it's rubbish. It's also going to be a disconnect. Obviously, you have to keep going. This often isn't easy, so you need to keep pushing through so that your request can get met. So what we like to do is switch from demands to requests, and requests, I'd like to frame it as an invitation. It's an invitation to others to problem solve with you, not directing other people to comply. So when you have a need that's being unmet and you figure out what it is that you want, now you invite others to help you. Inviting is connecting. And an invitation could look like this. Would you be willing to help me find a better way to remember the instructions? It's far less brutal, but it's also giving somebody an out if they aren't able or able in that moment to help you and help you find a better way. Well, it sounds like we're going to have to still get some clarity over the better way, but there doesn't seem to be any blame apportioned to this. There wasn't because somebody messed up here or was confusing. This person just simply wants to help find a better way for themselves. So would I be willing to assist that? I might not be able to right now, but it sounds like I can understand that's what needs to happen. More likely to find empathy to connect with them. So when requests connect, we tend to use positive language. We know what we want from somebody. You give context, you use clear and concrete words, be specific, and continue to employ empathy and a desire to continue connecting, even if it's difficult, to be able to keep moving through that. And when requesting and inviting turns into that, we can move forwards to sharing our connection in a way that's going to be easily and empathetically received by somebody. And this is where the last bit of the Human Handbook kind of comes in, the requesting stage. Not only is it in conversation where connection is key and we follow the steps, but also in how we employ it in the handbook itself. So on the right-hand side of the second page of your PDF template, you'll see information, being in meetings and receiving feedback. This is a great opportunity to think about the invitations to others about how you could get your needs met, what works for you, what doesn't, but to frame those 3 boxes in rather than a demanding to demands and to directing people to comply with you, you must do this, you must do that, but more to be written as though it is an invitation. So mine, for example, I do not process or remember information easily if only receiving it verbally. Bit of context for you. So I asked that it be written down where possible, especially with people's names. I've been very specific, but I've also said where possible. I'm not, this is, it'd be nice if you could, but only where possible. Similarly about appreciating editable documents. I appreciate them. I'm not telling you have to, but I'm offering to you that they work for me. And actually, I'm giving you context because I can take the information and use them into something that is visual that I respond to a bit better. Bullet points are helpful. So they're helpful to me because I can access key information. And I value concise clarity. So I value something. I may ask you for more detail if I'm unclear. So again, this is about an offering and like an invitation for you to work with me on those things. It's okay if you can't comply to all these things, that's fine. But I'm saying that actually you'll find a better connection with me if we go there. Same with being in meetings. And apology, there's some rogue letters there on the page. I find virtual meetings more challenging than face-to-face, so prefer to meet in person, okay? And if not, I appreciate backgrounds blurred. And so again, it's all about appreciating and valuing and giving some context as to why I do so. So an agenda in advance of a meeting. Again, it's quite a concrete, specific thing, as opposed to just, can you just give me a heads up about what? How does that look like? So again, I'm sort of letting you know that I will probably have a drink around, because I need a fidget toy, but I definitely need something to sort of hold, because that's part of my focus. I'm not apologizing. I'm not making excuses. I'm not divulging too much. I'm just saying that that is what I find works for me. So these are good examples of utilizing that requesting language. So this has been part one, where we have identified fast thinking. We've seen how it disconnects. We've used the framework steps 1, 2, 3, and 4 to get us to a point of slow thinking. And in that slow thinking phase is where we find better connection. That's kind of ultimately where we're heading, wherever possible. But obviously we still have the gap. For some who've seen the keynote, you know what's coming. For those that haven't, this is hopefully been a lovely surprise. But this is, again, coming back to like, okay, this gap, linking our intentions to actions. We have the Human Handbook, but like, okay, what do we do with it now? And this is kind of where part 2 will come in. And this is kind of what we'll go into in much more detail in the next session. Now we've got a Human Handbook. What do we do? What do we do with it? And it's actually how you role model using it, how you use not only the framework and conversations, but actually using the tool of the Human Handbook. What I encourage, particularly those that are in leadership and managerial positions, is by being able to actually now use some leverage here. This iceberg needs to become differently visible to people. We need to use that requesting stage, the Human Handbook stage, in a slightly different way. We need to turn it upside down. We need to turn that up as a team effort and work together. But we want to bring that Human Handbook to the top. We want to build it on our understanding of needs, why they're kind of connected to our feelings, and the feelings are connected to the true things we observe. And your job, in a particular leadership position, is by being able to sort of use your foundational learning and bring that Human Handbook to the fore in various aspects of your work. And in doing so, you're actually making all those hidden things visible, and proudly and with curiosity and kindness and dignity, you're making things visible that otherwise wouldn't be. And then you can use it to bridge the gap. And this is why we use triangles, but this is why we feel that the Human Handbook is a great way to bridge that gap between the values and intentions that you come to work with, and being able to employ better practice and utilize it for your actions. From this bridge, you can bring an awful lot of people with you, and whether that's employees, team members, colleagues, or friends and family who, you know, have also equal interpersonal skills with, it's important that we kind of work from this place. And part 2 is where we are going to be. We're going to be on this bridge for part 2, and we're going to see how we can move people from one side to the other. As we've said when we did the first keynote, the idea of this Human Handbook can be used in lots of different guises, depending on how your organization works and how your teams are run. But we tend to find, obviously, for recruitment, it's a fantastic way to immediately make that connection. Same with onboarding. Great way to kind of kickstart in a positive way. But it can be used when we're dealing with performance reviews. It's a document, a living document, that can continually be looked at by both parties to see if those connections are still strong and being maintained. So that goes for feedback, but it also goes for managing teams, maybe new teams working together. Maybe it's a specific project management that requires different sets of skilled people or expertises that have not come into contact with each other before. And working with, you know, 0-hour contracts with freelancers, with other subcontractors that come and go, that you don't have that opportunity to build relationships with them within an office over time, and how you can work with people that are more fleeting in your workplace. So your post-session task is to complete the Human Handbook. It's not mandatory. It'll obviously, you know, that's why you're turning up to the sessions. It would be of great value to you if you could, but don't worry if you can't for whatever reason. But we offer it that you fill in the Human Handbook to your best of your abilities. You fill in your name, it'd be great, something about who you are that you're willing to share. Your communication preferences based on those feelings that we talked about, phone calls and emails, what you might need from a physical point of view and a psychological point of view, and then thinking about how you offer and invite people, request people to work with you around how you like to absorb information instructions, how you like to be in meetings, and how you like to receive feedback. So that's a good opportunity for you to enact the whole requesting stage. I just ask you to not do the bit that says not this bit at the top of the right hand corner. It would be in the top of the second page, the strongest learning style. We are going to do this in the next session, so don't worry about that bit. But everything else, if you can have a stab at it and begin to fill it in, excuse me, then we can move on to the next part and see how we can employ this. So to summarize, when we're connected, that's the aim here. We generate empathy. Therefore, we can positively challenge and effectively eliminate biases, and we can advocate for all our needs in a safe and meaningful way. That is how we uphold good mental health and positive well-being within workspaces. We've come to the end. I would love to get your feedback to a final shout out on Mentimeter. Let me go to my screen, and there's no dogs in this one, sorry. But what 3 words or concepts will you take away from today's session? It would be great to hear if there's any phrases, and perhaps for the benefit of other people on this call, what was particularly interesting to you today that you think you might go and consider, maybe reflect upon, or maybe utilised in your everyday. I'll give you a couple of minutes to think about that. Meanwhile, Sarah, I can answer any sort of questions on chat, or if there's been any specific questions, I can respond. Otherwise, I will let the feedback mentee run. So, Sarah, anything I can respond to?
So I don't think so. No, we've had a couple of nice comments throughout, but no questions as such. Everyone will see that I've put the link to the Human Handbook in there, but you don't need to worry too much because it will be emailed to you afterwards. And if you haven't already, please make sure you're booked for part 2, which is incredibly important.